We're back talking golf on Proline TV for another Tuesday. That means we welcome in Brady Kannon, Las Vegas golf handicapper extraordinaire. How's it going there, Brady?
I'm good, my friend. How are you?
Doing good. This is like, I guess you could consider the Amex, um, the calm before the storm, and in effect that there's going to be some really good events slowly coming around. Sony was nice because it was our first big field, and it's a pretty decent golf course, especially after what we always have to open up with. This is almost like having a full field, but back in the century, where it's just going to be a low score, it might be in the 30s. Very difficult to handicap, and we're going to get into all the trends and the reasons why. But hey, it's a golf tournament. It's January, and it's better than nothing. So let's go get them.
Yeah, all of that doesn't mean we can't bet on it, right?
No, exactly.
But you're right. The season kind of starts out a little soft, and I think that's good that it lets the players kind of ease into things. You get a real birdie fest at Kapalua and the gorgeous views. It's just a wonderful place to land when most of the United States, continental US is cold, and you gotta get to see that warm weather and these players having some fun and making a bunch of birdies. And then you roll over to YLA last week, and that was pretty tough. The scoring was much more difficult. And now we get another birdie fest as we make our way to the mainland. And you're right. We kind of gear up for some real tough stuff. We've got Torrey Pines, a U.S. Open course. And then we've got Pebble Beach, another U.S. Open track. We've got the Phoenix, for Super Bowl weekend, which is a very good golf course and tough tournament, a signature event. And then, we have to wait and see if we'll even have the Genesis Invitational this year at Riviera Country Club, one of my favorite places in the world, obviously incredibly affected by the Southern California fires, The fires in Los Angeles. It's absolutely amazing, actually, that the golf course is still even there. Somehow, miraculously, right in the heart of Pacific Palisades, Riviera Country Club has not been affected at this time as we speak. And I think it's going to be able to survive at this point. But whether or not, in a month from now or a month and a half from now, they're going to be ready to hold a PGA Tour event, I doubt it. But you're right. We kind of ease into the season a little bit with some easier stuff, and it allows guys to kind of get warmed up, kind of allows us to get warmed up in our handicapping too. We've been paying attention to football for the last few months, trying to get back into the swing of things for golf here before we ramp it up with some big time signature events, and eventually that stroll down Magnolia Lane in early April.
Yeah, I tell you, I wasn't even thinking about that. Of course, I'm on the East Coast. You're out on the West Coast, so it's a lot more, in your face. But yeah, we got to keep an eye on that. And like you said, though, there hasn't been anything yet at this point. Next week. So as far as we know, and again, next week is a California event, which, by the way, just to remind everybody, it's a Wednesday start next week.
Yeah.
So it's a Wednesday to Saturday. And I don't really have to guess hard of why they're doing that. It's
a great thing that they've done, Greg. They started doing that, I want to say, about 4 years ago. Maybe it's been even 5 years ago. But because the NFL dominates Conference Championship Sunday, when you have the two games who eventually result in a Super Bowl matchup, Torrey Pines, the Farmers Insurance Open, has adjusted for a Wednesday through Saturday finish. And I love it. It's because golf is kind of the only thing going on for those 4 days. You finish up on Saturday, they crown a champion in La Jolla, and then we roll into Championship Sunday in the NFL. So, and it all started a while ago when the PGA Tour adjusted its schedule, where they put the PGA Championship in May, the British Open, the final major of the year, in July. They pretty much wrap up the season in the third week of August, right before the NFL kicks off. So I think they've kind of just said, hey, we understand what's going on here. We're going to optimize the real estate that we have on the calendar. And I think they've done a great job at that. I kind of wish, this is a whole nother show we could do, but I wish baseball would do that. I mean, the NFL, we know, dominates the sports calendar. So I think the PGA Tour has done a great job at finding their spots in the schedule where they can be the biggest game in town.
Yeah, Super Bowl Sunday, of course, it's one of those things with the Phoenix event that you can't do anything about playoffs, but it does happen, and it works its way into the game if it's a late event. And I'm just thinking, probably have to think about moving up the tee times a little bit, just in case. Nothing wrong if you have a half hour or an hour of time in the middle.
Well, that's the way it typically plays out. I remember it was years ago. I actually hit Webb Simpson in Phoenix. He was in a playoff, I believe, with Tony Finau. I want to say that was 2019, and it did kind of just barely bleed into the beginning of the game. But barring a playoff or any sort of delay, yeah, typically the Phoenix Open is finished. The Waste Management, now they call it. I think it's typically finished, I want to say, about an hour or so before game time. And that's another great, golf lead up into football. That's a wild tournament, and you can see if you can cash a ticket before you dive into the Super Bowl, right? So yeah, that's another great positioning by the PGA Tour, in my opinion.
And now we got to see whether or not Scotty's going to be there. We know how good he is. And of course, we just had another withdrawal from a favorite coming in. I mean, I didn't even realize Xander had withdrew until a couple hours ago. So we got to keep our eye on, I think, Scotty more. Xander, nobody knows yet, right? We have no idea. He hasn't come out and said specifically what the reason was. Did it have anything to do with him playing the Tiger event? I mean, we don't have any word on yet, do we?
No, I haven't seen anything, and that's fine. I probably wouldn't have been betting on him here anyway. So that's, take him out of the mix. No problem there. Scotty apparently still dealing with the hand injury that he suffered over the Christmas holiday. Now he plans to try and make the signature event at Pebble Beach, which is in 2 weeks. Okay. He was planning on trying to be here for the American Express, just not ready to go quite yet. I would expect he'll show up at Pebble in 2 weeks.
And don't forget, in 2 weeks, we're going to have our season preview special. And that's going to give us an opportunity, as we said in our first show, where we're going to get a couple of weeks, just kind of get a feel for what's going on. And then we'll have a whole bunch of really cool, predictions, things of that nature. And I did speak with my analyst from the past few years, Jared Smola, who is, as we said, going to join us from time to time, signature events, majors, and things like such. And Jared said he's going to be able to join us for that one. So that should be good. The more, the merrier for us to get another voice to let us know and let you guys know what we think about players to keep an eye on for the 2025 season. All right. Let's just quick do a recap of what happened last week. As you mentioned, the Sony, and it did look there for a while that JJ Spawn and Steven Yeager were going to kind of they took over Saturday, and then it looked like for about half of the day on Sunday, they were in control, they were in the leading, and then all of a sudden, with just a few holes to go, everything changed. And Nick Taylor and then one of my picks, Echeverria, he came on strong. Of course, Nick Taylor pulled off a Grayson Murray, basically. Which was to chip it in. It was, of course, Murray had the long, I think it was 70-foot putt to win it in a playoff. But Nick put himself into the playoff with a long chip, eagle. And at the time, I was okay with it because, of course, we had been communicating. We talked last week. We thought Taylor was a really good play. He had been 7th in this event the 2 years prior. So he had basically just missed making our card. But obviously, he gets off to a good start. So, I know I put some money on him. So I was set either way, but didn't realize that I was going to be disappointed that he won because Echeverria once again did what my pick last year, Benny On, did, and that's choked it away when it looked like he was in control.
Well, you knew Taylor was going to win that playoff with how he got into. I mean, he was riding so much momentum, and I have to say that feels to me like one of the luckier wins I've ever seen. I mean, I want to say he was halfway through the tournament or halfway through the final round and was like 5 shots off the lead. Maybe it was more. And he himself, I believe, said he kind of figured he was done. And then all of a sudden, and then he chips in. I was like, oh my God. And yeah, you knew he was going to win the playoff at that point, riding, like I said, riding a momentum wave like that. I think Echeverria had no shot at that point. But, Nick Taylor went off at triple digits again, like Grayson Murray did last year as well. And here we are at La Quinta this week, where 4 out of the last 6 winners have gone off at double-digit price, or triple-digit prices, I should say, for Taylor and Murray, and 4 out of the last 6 here at the Amex, including Nick Dunlap, the amateur last year, who was about the lowest price I saw was 500 to 1 on Nick Dunlap last year. So a lot of crazy winners at these 2 tournaments in the last couple of years.
Yeah. If you look at it, speaking of course, this event this week, the Amex, overall, the last 18 winners had an average world ranking of 384th before playing here. Now, again, keep in mind, okay, Dunlap was 4,129th last year. So even if we take him out, okay, it is now, if you're looking at it, 17 of the last 18 had an average world ranking of 153rd. So it is still a very high number. Matter of fact, Adam Long won in 2019.
Right. I remember that well.
And did he beat Mickelson?
Yes, he chased down Phil Mickelson, Adam Long, and he's pretty much never been heard from since. I mean, he's contended in a couple of tournaments here and there. Total journeyman type guy. Andrew Landry, Adam Hadwin, a very good player who's contended multiple times here at the American Express, never won it, but he's been right there. John Rahm has won it. So, I mean, you've had some bigger names, but for the most part, Hudson Swafford, of all people, has won it twice. I mean, it is just a really random tournament. I think the most random tournament on the entire tour schedule. And we'll get into it a little bit further, but I've really dumbed down the risk this week. We touched on it last week. You were asking me, okay, we talk about the correlated courses. What matches up with the American Express next week? And I said, off the top of my head, I don't know. I know that this is just a crapshoot. And it really is. I mean, you think about that. If you're looking at the odds board and you're going to say, okay, who are the favorites? Who makes sense at the top of the board? Okay, who makes sense in the middle of the pack? Who makes sense a little deeper? And then you're saying to yourself, well, over the course of the last 18 years, it's been a guy that ranks 150th in the world. Who makes sense in that range?
Yes.
Nobody does. This is a really tough tournament.
Yeah. And it's not easy picking the long shots because you've got to in an event like this. It's just not easy doing it. It's a lot harder doing the long shots, obviously, than the players that are more consistent. Now, John Rahm has won a couple of times. Matter of fact, he's the only top player that's won over the last, I believe, and again, it's about 17 or 18 events. If you look at it, Rahm has 2 wins and are the only time among the last 12 years that the winner has priced, as you mentioned, shorter than 30 to 1. And also, if you look at Rahm, the only winner with a top 40 ranking during the last 18 events was John Rahm, doing it twice. So that's incredible. We talked about the average ranking. Sometimes you've got John Rahm, and I think when he won, he was 4th and 3rd. Outside of that, the next best was 41st during that span. So that just makes it really difficult. If you go by these trends, and I know we do, which is why, again, we've said this before, if you have a system, you stick with it. You try not to deviate as hard as it's going to be to not go after some of these guys because they're just so much better. It's just the way that it's always panned out. And here's another one. 15 of the last 17 winners played in either the Century or the Sony Open.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty good way to go.
I like that one. I mean, that one makes a ton of sense, right? It's kind of like we talked about last week, where 8 out of the last 11 winners at the Sony had played the week before at the Sentry at Kapalua. Well, basically the same thought process here, where 15 out of the last 17 winners have either played or sometimes both of the weeks in Hawaii. And it's kind of what we talked about at the top of the show too. This beginning of the season, you kind of ease into things with a pretty easy golf course, the Plantation course. You're in Hawaii. That's a pretty nice gig. Then you kind of come into the mainland here in California. You start off with another birdie fish. These guys are kind of easing into the season. But history has shown that if you make this your first stop where you come in cold and you haven't had a little bit of warm up, then you typically don't win. So, and it's again, the same thought that you typically don't win the Sony if you haven't at least been over in Hawaii for a week, adjust to the time change, get a couple competitive rounds under your belt. So I went with guys this week on my card, all of whom had played either both or at least 1 week in Hawaii.
Also, if you look at it during those last 17 that I just mentioned, keep in mind it was 8 straight that had either won the Century or Sony Open, but Dunlap, he obviously nixed that among a whole bunch of other things. Mark Wilson, though, is the only player during that stretch to have played in both. So that's interesting.
Wow. I didn't know that.
But I think that one will probably go quicker because now we have a bigger field at the Century. Obviously, Dunlap did not play in either event, so he's one of those outliers. 11 of the last 15 first-time winners were making just their 4th appearance or less, including 4 who won here on their first appearance. Dunlap being one of them, Adam Long another. 12 of the last 15 first-time winners registered either their first or second career PGA Tour victory. And 6 of the last 15 first-time winners made this event their maiden PGA Tour win, with Dunlap, Long, Johnny Vegas, and Charlie Hoffman all making this their maiden PGA win in their first appearance on the golf course. So those are some of the key trends to keep an eye on for this week. And let's get started, first of all, by taking a look at our picks. Don't forget, we have different systems here. I have the basic system. I just let you know what I'm going to put on financially, dollar risk. And Brady goes by the units. And we explained that last week. Just a quick little explanation again, Brady, about the units.
Yeah, whatever your unit is. Your unit might be $50. Your unit might be $100. Your unit might be $500 or $5,000. Whatever your standard bet is, I'm recommending 0.17 units risked on my top play there, Kurt Kitayama. So basically 20% of what your unit is. If your unit is $100, that means $20 risked, or in this case, 17. If your unit is $200, it means $34 risked. Anyway, roughly 17 to 20% there of whatever your unit is what I'm going to risk on Kurt Kitayama, for example. Now, typically, I will risk 2.5 times that amount on a finish position bet, like a top 20 bet. And then I'll risk a full unit on a head-to-head matchup. I don't have any finish position bets this week or any head-to-head matchup bets this week because, again, we've kind of illustrated it here. This is a crapshoot. This is a random tournament. I'm going to risk basically a little over half a unit this week. About 60% of a unit is all I'm going to risk. I spread it out across 6 different guys, see if I can land on one to win the tournament. But I don't want to get over my skis too deep here with money risked because this is a pretty tough one. You know, it was funny, Greg. I was thinking about this tournament and how I haven't had a great deal of success here. The predictability is very difficult. I was thinking, like, over the course of the last 20, 30 years or whatever it is that I've been betting on golf, I wonder if I've hit an outright winner at each PGA Tour tournament, at each golf course.
Sure.
I think it's close. You know, I've hit the Masters winner. I've hit the PGA. I've hit all this stuff. But at the Amex, I don't even recall ever having a guy in contention. You know
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean? So I went pretty light, dumbed it down quite a bit this week with the units risk there, and 6 guys to win it outright. Hey, hopefully we get one.
Oh yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, and usually we don't even have to look at like a record keeping deal, because we bet golf, whether or not you've had a winner there. It just, the memory pops into your head. Yeah, I remember that guy, and I remember what happened, because it's very different from winning a football game or a baseball game, because you do thousands of them over your career and win thousands of them. But you don't win thousands of golf events.
Right.
It's a lot smaller number, and you remember each and every one of them. Some obviously bigger than others, like you said. If you hit a Masters event, or if you hit a big long shot, those are things that you never forget. Okay, so here we go. As we just take a look at some of the favorites here first. And as far as the favorites, look, if you're out there and you want to buck the system and you want to go the John Rahm route and you think that's the way to go, then let's see what we can do for you. In that respect, look, Justin Thomas, now that Schauffele's out of here, I do think it's hard. If anybody wants to take Justin Thomas at 14-1, I actually don't think that's a bad idea. 14-1 in this field is not bad for Justin Thomas with how well he's playing. I think the problem with Thomas is not the fact that he isn't playing well, even though he did not play particularly well a couple weeks ago, but he played here last year and finished third and was right there in contention for the win. And a lot of people probably thought he was going to win because Nick Dunlap was in contention. And, oh, he's not going to win, is he? And that's exactly what happened. But JT is one of the problems with JT, though, is he hasn't really been doing very well on Bermuda greens lately. This has been a little bit of a bugaboo for him lately. So that's just something to keep in mind, even though it's not a very difficult golf course. And Sam Burns. So those are the two like top guys, especially on this board, that I would recommend. Burns, really good in this model. Also, I mean, his putting is strong. He's got 9 top 15s in his last 11. He's got a runner-up at the BMW, 6th here last year. I think he was in contention. I don't know. He might even.
He looked like he was going to win it.
Yes.
He looked like he was going to be the winner, and he put it in the water on, I believe it was the 17th hole, and that dropped him all the way back. I think he may have bogeyed 18 as well, but that dropped him back to 6th place, and that's what opened the door for Nick Dunlap. But it absolutely looked like Sam Burns was going to win this last year.
Yeah, so just out of this group here, those would be a couple of guys that I would be looking at. And before we move on and get to some of the players outside of this group, what about you? Would you recommend a player here?
I couldn't argue with somebody taking Justin Thomas or Sam Burns. Obviously, they're the class of the field. You mentioned the putting. Maybe it hasn't been as good as of late. I mean, Justin Thomas is not a great putter, period, but Bermuda typically has been his best surface. Now, Sam Burns is a very good putter, and Bermuda is also his best surface. Very familiar with the Bermuda surface. Both of these guys went to college in the South, where you get a lot of Bermuda, on courses. So that's probably their best surface. Soon J.M. has maybe been the most consistent guy at this tournament. I mean, he just seems to finish top 20, if not even better, every year he tees it up here. He just hasn't won in a long time. So it's hard to, bet him at such a short price. Finau seems to, be certainly a very deserving favorite, but, he's contended here, if I recall, once in the last, 5-10 years. I think he finished third or something like that. But again, we go back to this tournament. There's not a lot of consistency. If there's any consistency, it's Soon J.M. But other than that,
Sure.
you got to kind of just throw the right dart and hope you land on the right year that one guy gets hot.
And a couple other things to point out. Again, just to remind everybody, you're going to be playing on 3 golf courses. You've got the Stadium course, the La Quinta course, and the Nicholas course. Then they go back to the Stadium course for the final round, which is the toughest course. So that makes a lot of sense. That's the Pete Dye design course. So I know it's not 4 rounds of Pete Dye, but hey, you know what? If that's the toughest one and it's on Sunday, you may want to take a look at players who have performed well or not on Pete Dye type golf courses. Once again, you got Bermuda greens, not very long as far as the length, 71, 81. That's the longest, I believe, at Nicholas. And when you're following and you just wanted to take a look at the tee times, or the days, I should say, and you've got the 3 days with the 3 golf courses, if you want to have a strategy, whatever it is, just keep in mind La Quinta is going to be the easiest and Stadium Course is going to be the hardest.
Yeah. All 3 of these courses, are pretty easy. If you look at the scoring average, they're well below par. I know here in Las Vegas, my good friend Jeff Sherman, one of the best golf odds makers in the world, he's at the Westgate Superbook, and he set the winning score proposition bet this week. You can take under or over 259.5, which translates to 28.5 under par. So, there's a good chance we're getting to close to 30 under par this week, no matter what course you're on. You're right. And that adds to the difficulty of the handicap as well, because you have a 3-course rotation. There is not any shot link data for La Quinta Country Club or the Nicklaus Tournament course. The shot link data is only on the Pete Dye Stadium course. So, when we're trying to look at, what skill sets make sense here, only 50% of the numbers are really available to us. Yeah. So that makes things difficult as well.
Yeah, and there's a couple players in mind that I did not take myself this week. Some of it did have to do with that. I'll be honest, but we'll get into that a little bit later, and I'll explain why. Meanwhile, the other thing too to keep in mind too, regarding, and you talked about similar golf courses and how difficult it is to figure out, and there's no question about that. But the other thing, I mean, because I know you didn't come up with one. I mean, I think last week you mentioned Shriners and TPC Scottsdale. Would you also would you also like to include TPC Sawgrass in that mix as well?
Well, I've heard some people talk about that they say the Pete Dye Stadium course is similar to TPC Sawgrass. And I don't know how much I really buy that. Sawgrass is obviously very difficult.
Yeah.
I'm looking at what skill sets matter and sometimes there are similarities in the golf courses and you see an obvious connection, and sometimes there's not, like Kapalua or let's say Augusta National and Kapalua, the Plantation course. There are similarities with the big wide fairways and the elevation change and the big greens, but then they also really correlate well with Riviera Country Club where they play the Genesis, and those aren't necessarily similar. So some things make sense in that regard and some don't. If you look here at what these courses, the Nicklaus Tournament course, La Quinta, and the Stadium course, pretty much they favor driving distance, and driving accuracy is not a big deal at all because there's no rough to speak of. You can spray the ball around at these courses a little bit and not get into too much trouble. That's not the case at TPC Sawgrass. You've got to be much more accurate there. I would say accuracy is more at a premium than distance is. So that's one thing for me right off the top where I would say, no, I didn't really. Now, Scottsdale, yes, I do see a connection with TPC Scottsdale and also TPC Summerlin, which is right here in Las Vegas where they play the Shriners Children's Open. I do see a connection there. Actually, Valhalla Country Club, where they played the PGA Championship, Corrales, where they play the Corrales Punta Cana, and then also Silverado up in Napa, California, where they play what is now called the Procore Championship. But those courses, not a lot of rough. Driving distance outweighs driving accuracy, and the short game, the necessary, for scrambling and getting up and down around the greens, is very minimalized. It's not difficult here at any of these golf courses. Hitting the greens in regulation is fairly easy. So you're not having to, scramble and get up and down from a lot of difficult places around these courses. Again, it's a lot about being really good tee to green and making a lot of putts. And that's what a lot of those courses are also favoring, if you will, that type of player that can do that. And I don't think that's necessarily a match with TPC Sawgrass. You got to do everything.
Yeah, I agree.
In Sawgrass.
Yeah. Oh, and another thing too. Remember, this used to be, in case you're old enough to remember, this used to be the old Bob Hope Classic.
Yeah.
And it was a pro-am, you had 5 rounds. And now it's a little bit more normalized again with the 4 days, and it's sort of like Pebble with the 3 and the 1 at the end. And but the other thing that's important to note is that because I don't know about you, but I think the best way to look at just the past performance is to go back to just 2016. That's what I would do, because it's the last 9 years to be the 10th that we've had the same rotation. So I think that's important. Other people might say, well, it's, if you go back a little bit further, you're still getting 3 of the 4, and I don't look at it that much. But again, everybody's different. That's the way I do it. I don't. How do you do it?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think most of these players in the field weren't even around,
that's true
10
too.
years ago.
Yes.
It's a lot of young guys. I mean, just barely. I mean, you're talking about even some of the older guys. Okay, Jonathan Vegas, you mentioned. He's been around a while. Charlie Hoffman won this event way back. I think it was 2008. He was one of those guys that did not play in Hawaii the week before or the 2 weeks prior. He and Bill Haas in 2015 are the only 2 guys in the last what did we say, 17 years that haven't teed it up in Hawaii a couple of the weeks prior. So yeah, I mean, you're talking a lot of guys that have much newer on the scene.
Yeah.
This is not a signature event where you have some of the older guys like Adam Scott and Justin Rose. And, I think, I'd like to know, but it's probably at least 90% of this field probably wasn't even around before that change. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's still a pro-am, but thankfully they've reduced it to just 4 rounds. I mean, you still have the long, 5-6 hour rounds. And that's another thing that makes the tournament easy when there's 3 days that you're going to have the amateurs playing with the professionals. So the pin positions are going to be very accessible. Like I said, there's really no rough to speak of. They've got to keep this playable for the amateurs as well. So the pros, on the other hand, are going to be able to tear it up.
And thankfully, as far as I'm concerned, the Pro-Am doesn't bring out the celebrities like in Pebble. Back in the day, I was a little bit more for it because you just had these really cool people, even Clint Eastwood and all those people, all right, that's cool. Nowadays, some of the guys that are passing for entertainers nowadays, it's like, do we really have to show this much of the celebrities playing golf? It's the one thing. Now I'm so glad that they have the signature event, because now it's much more important to zero in on the players for all 4 rounds. But that was killing me every year because I love Pebble, and it's like I always have to look at Thursday and Friday on television. It's just bad TV, because they're more interested in showing the celebrities than they are the regular players. And I just can't watch it. So I'm glad that that's kind of behind us now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And you're right. Also, back in the day, you had Clint Eastwood and Gerald Ford and, George Bush. I mean, you had some really, when Bob Hope was behind the whole deal down here in Palm Desert, you had some very big names. And then, of course, Bing Crosby was the guy that was behind the clam bake at Pebble Beach. And no, but it's become much more of a corporate thing now, guys that run companies are, spending a bunch of money and hey, thank goodness for their support and all that good stuff. But no, I'm not interested in watching them play golf.
Yeah. And they'll show these, let's take a look now at the president of so-and-so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess we know why we're taking a look at the president of so-and-so, and somebody's signing their check in the back room there. All right, let's get back to golf. So here we go. Now we're going to start getting to the point where we're going to start throwing in some of our players. Matter of fact, on this list, we have 3 out of our 5. You have 2, I have 1. You have Tom Kim and Kurt Kitayama, and I have Max Grayserman. I really like Grayserman here. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned with Grayserman are the odds are low. Again, he was 40-1 before Schauffele. And I don't know if, I'm really good about that, but he has been playing and justifiably so well lately.
Oh yeah, no, he's been, I want to say it was 3 straight or no, when you go back to last year, I think he had 3 runner-up finishes and 5 PGA Tour starts. I mean, this guy was the ultimate bridesmaid there last summer.
Uh-huh.
He's going to get a win eventually. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I noticed his price is short, and everybody knows about him now. And this is the type of tournament he could certainly win, because the field is a little bit watered down. It's a birdie fest. We know the guy can go low. So no, him being successful this week would not surprise me, but I haven't found the right spot where I want to land on him just yet.
You do, though, have Tom Kim and Kurt Kitayama. We talked about Kitayama last week. He had played really well down the stretch and then kind of took off for a while, came back last week, and maybe this is the perfect time to jump on him because now he's got his feet wet.
Yeah, I like the fact that he got a few competitive rounds under his belt. He shot 3 of the 4 rounds in the 60s last week at a par 70 YLA Country Club. That's not easy. That's pretty darn good. He finished 37th, which is respectable for his first start of the season. He's played very well with top 10 finishes at both TPC Scottsdale and also TPC Summerlin right here in Las Vegas. He finished 26th at Valhalla. I talked about Valhalla being one of the correlated courses for me this week. Finished 26th at the PGA Championship last year. And that makes sense. That course certainly favored driving distance and ball striking. And, accuracy wasn't as much of a concern. And I think that's the case here. Now, if Kitayama could just get the putter hot, and you have to have a hot putter in a birdie fest. And if he can do that, I think he'll be right there. Over the course of the last 24 rounds, he ranks 6th in this entire field in strokes gained on approach. So we know this guy's going to be hitting greens. He's going to be finding fairways. And if he can just hold some putts, I think he'll be in the mix. Got him at 30-1, and then one tick higher at 31-1, Tom Kim. And that price surprised me a little bit on Kim. Yes. Kim was very popular. I saw a lot of people that liked Tom Kim last week at the Sony Open, and I believe he missed the cut. But he's had, a couple weeks in Hawaii. He's had a few competitive rounds under his belt. And yet maybe the cut last week has allowed his price to drift, but
he was 65th last week.
Oh, he did make the cut. Okay.
Well, not still very good.
Yeah. Not a great finish. No. Maybe that's caused his price to drift here, but Tom Kim, you got to believe certainly one of the top 10 players in this field. And to see him at 30 or better to 1, I thought that was a pretty darn good price. We know this guy can play in a birdie fest. We saw him finish runner-up to Scotty Scheffler at the Travelers Championship last year. He's similar to Kitayama. I would say overall he might be a better player than Kitayama, but similar in the sense that he's a tremendous ball striker, and you just have to hope that the putter gets hot. So that's the storyline really with both of those guys, and I don't mind their prices at all.
Yeah, matter of fact, this is interesting. If you want to look at this type of potential trend for Kim, he's played this event 3 times. He's got a missed cut, he's got a 6th, and he's got a missed cut.
Yeah. So okay, top 10 again this time, right?
Yeah.
And he was 6th in 2023. So I mean, he's shown that he can go well here already.
Well, again, and we talked about this last week, is his inconsistency, and so maybe that'll work in his favor this week, because in his last 4 events, he's been from runner-up, then miscut, runner-up, then 65th, and now here we go.
He's due again. I talk about TPC Summerlin being a correlated course. Well, Tom Kim, all he's done there is win twice back-to-back. So, maybe something about these desert courses that have the wide open fairways, suit his eye.
In this next group, we only have 1 player, and that is my pick. And so you have 2 in the normal kind of range, and so do I. My second is Cameron Young at 35-1. And for Cam, obviously his game went away for a little bit, and who knows? I have no idea if it's back yet. I know statistically speaking, it's not yet. His putting is still an issue, but a couple of things. One is that he is trending in the right direction, which I like. And he's also played here twice, and he's been better. He was much better his second time. He 18 under par, finishing 26th a couple of years ago, coming off an 8th place finish at the Century, 13th before that. So I think he's trending. It's a perfect field for him. And keep in mind, Cameron Young has never won a PGA Tour event before. And I'm sure a lot of people probably wouldn't believe that, but that's the case. And And so and the other thing too is, again, if you want to throw in a couple of similar courses, he was 8th at Phoenix last year and 9th at Travelers. The model is not bad. So yeah, I kind of figured, you know what, why not? Because he was 45 to 1 originally, and now he's down to 35 to 1. So again, for a couple of players I took in my group, this same reason you took Kim at 30 to 1. There's several players that are really talented that are getting some good odds, and I think Young's odds at 35 to 1 are not that bad in this field.
Well, yeah, people are finally starting to maybe doubt him a little bit because, he seems to contend often, but never can break through and get the win. And, it seems like he's been contending a little, fewer and further between than maybe he has, in the past. So it feels like his stock is going down a little bit. And oftentimes that's the right time to jump on a guy.
Yeah, I took him last year, actually, when he finished 8th in Phoenix, and he got off to a really good start. He was hanging around, but just like it was last year, he just couldn't finish the deal. Just too inconsistent late, especially on Sunday. The other player to note here is Harry Hall. One of your picks from last week. Hall might still be a good play this week. If you look at him, he's sitting there at a nice 40 to 1. Hall, a couple of things. Well, there's one thing that at least it's working against him. He hasn't played particularly well on this golf course. And if you look overall, he also, I believe, let's see, he's got a couple of things working against him. Nothing to really shout out about. But for him, he's the model likes him a lot, which is really good. And also, his play is better than it's ever been. He's started the year with a 10th and an 8th, and he's got 7 straight top 35s with 3 of those top 10. So it's another player that even though there's some things to maybe not like about him, you're getting 40 to 1. He's a hot player, not a bad idea.
Yeah, I almost landed on him. I wanted to see him a little bit higher. I think if he was at 50 to 1 or better, I probably would have gone back to the window with Harry Hall. I almost landed on him at Kapalua. I did land on him last week at the Sony, and he was right there. He had a chance to win that darn thing, or at least get into the playoff. And it was kind of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. He just could never quite, find that rhythm. But one thing about being here, first of all, he's an extremely good putter, and he makes a ton of birdies. Over the last 24 rounds in this field, he ranks number 1 in birdies or better games. So you're probably going to get that out of him, and that's a good place to start here at the Amex.
All right. In this next grouping, I actually considered all of these guys. I decided out of this group, though, just to go at one, and that's Fishburne. We talked about him last week, and then here he goes again and plays well. Got off to a really good start. Just couldn't finish things over the weekend. But Fishburne is a kid that is really just starting to pick up his game overall. If you look at it, he is now. Let's see. If you look at how he's been playing. Keep this in mind. He's never won on the PGA Tour. He does have a win in Canada. This is only his second appearance here. And Fishburne was just like one of your picks, Kitayama, did not make the cut in his only appearance here. But he was 10 on the par, so that's not bad to miss the cut with. Coming off a 6th last week. He's got now 7 top 15s in his last 12. 2 of those are top 5s, and he's trending in the right direction with back-to-back top 10s. He's also pretty good on the model. So I think why not? Let's go. We didn't take him last week, but I'm going to go ahead and take him this week at 55 to 1. And like I said, I was thinking about all the players, and the one player that obviously I'm going to mention is Echeverria. I just don't know. I mean, he's been really poor on Pete Dye golf courses, like really poor. And if you look at him here, he hasn't played particularly well in his 2 years. So that was the one thing that just kind of bothered me about a little bit. Trust me, I'm putting money on him because I'm not going to not put money on and have him win. But just in my picks kind of formula, that bothered me a little bit. But I liked him last week, and he almost came through. And I see no reason why he may not be able to get back there, especially because the model likes him a lot. I just don't know about whether or not when it comes to playing the stadium course, he's going to be able to survive there, but we'll see. And then again, like I said, I think any of these players are all really good contenders, possible contenders.
Well, Echeverria, I mean, why wouldn't he be able to play well at the stadium course? The guy's arguably been the hottest player on the planet for the last few months.
That's
So,
right.
no, I mean, that close and losing in a playoff last week, maybe he bounces back here this week. But, he was a little bit similar to Nick Taylor, too, where all of a sudden there he was on the leaderboard again, and he just keeps doing it. I think it was the Zozo that he won, or maybe it was in Mexico. I know, obviously, he had his first win. Maybe it was his second win, but I can't even keep track because the guy's been playing so well as of late. He really just kind of burst on the scene. I want to say, it was this past summer. He's turned it into a win, but and obviously a loss in a playoff last week. He's been right there a handful of times, really playing good golf. So why not here again?
Yeah. And again, I think some of these other players are not bad too. Poston, I was thinking of because he had, I picked him last week. And keep in mind, in the last 3 years here, he's been 11th, 6th, and 25th. So not a bad idea there. There you see last week's contender Spawn, Harmon, another player that was around and in contention, Cole. Another one of my picks that just didn't work out for me late last week, and I was thinking again this week, but I decided against it. And once again, another situation where he has not played very well on the Pete courses, and he's been okay here though, just okay. He was 21st his last time out, 20 under par last year, and you are getting 60 to 1. So again, I think Eric Cole is not a bad idea. And then your pick is on here as well, Mac Meisner, and he has dropped to 65 to 1, which is saying something. He was 80 to 1 not too long ago, 90 to 1 yesterday. So there's a lot of money coming on the kid that you actually told me in a text over the weekend that was a nice play to drop into the top 25. I believe we were top 20, and he finished 21st last week. He missed the cut here last year at 8 under par, but he has 7 top 30s in his last 10, including a 4th at the Barracuda.
Yeah. That's the only thing I don't like about Meisner this week is his popularity. I've seen a couple of people in the golf betting space already on him, and we identified him last week. He was a guy that I almost landed on for the Sony. And, I'm kind of glad I didn't because he just missed the top 20 finish. Wouldn't have even cashed that ticket. But all that being said, I definitely liked the way he played. It was not surprising to me that he showed up and contended for a minute, had a couple of chances, just, kind of like Harry Hall, could never really put it all together, but had a very nice week over there at YLA. And I think, it continues for him here this week. It's similar. And a lot of my guys that I've selected this week, the theme is very similar. They're great iron players, and they just have to find a hot putter for 3 or 4 days. And I'm hoping that's the case. Kurt Kitayama, Tom Kim. Kitayama is 6th in this field. I mentioned over the last 24 rounds on strokes gained approach. Tom Kim ranks 5th. And Mac Meisner ranks 4th. So those guys can all stripe the irons, hit greens in regulation. Mac Meisner also really good in both length and accuracy off the tee. So again, and he's actually a decent putter, probably better overall than Kitayama or Kim. But hopefully he finds a hot putter for 3 or 4 days this week and makes some noise. I didn't play again any finish position markets, so it's all or nothing. I'm hoping he gets into the winner's circle.
In this next group, there's one player on my list, and that's Jason Day. And for me, this really had a lot to do with the odds. I was very surprised that in this field he was 70, he's now down to 65 to 1. He's still a very talented player. Matter of fact, if you look at it, you would think, well, talented, but I guess if he's getting odds like this, he must be going through some bad times. Well, no, he ended last year with 8 straight top 35s, including 2 top 10s. Yes, he's coming off of 40th at the Century, which isn't all that great, but he's got 3, average appearances here. Always making the cut. He was also 8th in Australia not too long ago. Again, this is all about odds and value. So I'm going to jump on Jason Day here. And I had to absolutely take Adam Hadwin. I'm sorry, but this is Adam Hadwin's golf course. He's already won one time in his career on the PGA Tour. If he's going to win again, it has to be here. I know he's not playing well, but it doesn't matter. When you got horses for courses players, they don't care when they're not playing well. They still play well at golf courses that they're just really good at. And keep this in mind. This is the highest earnings event for Adam Hadwin. He's made over $2 million here. And he's getting, again, 70 to 1. By the way, his number 2 highest earnings is the Shriners.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something interesting.
He's played tremendous on desert golf courses. And you're right. I mean, we talked about if there's any guy that's consistent, if there's anything that's consistent at the American Express, it's Sun J.M. doing well here. I forgot about Hadwin. I mean, I think he's finished runner-up twice.
Yes.
And other than that, he's had a number of top 10 finishes. I hear you loud and clear. It's hard to keep him off your card.
6th last year at 25 under par. A player I did not take that I was close to taking was Keith Mitchell. I was really close to taking him. He was 9th here last year. He's been better all 3 times he's played here. And he ended last year with 4 straight missed cuts. Before that, a 3rd, a 12th, and a 12th. Well, he was 30th last week, and he has gotten off to good starts the last few years. So maybe, the 30th last week will get him going again, but I just decided not to take him. But he's somebody that may not be a bad idea at 65 to 1.
Yeah, Keith Mitchell, it feels to me is one of those guys that, if you're not taking a look at him week in and week out, they take your wise guy card away. Because if you look at the odds board, every week it feels like somebody's hitting Keith Mitchell. Bo Hostler, there's a couple guys that just get hit every week because they appear as good value. Like their number is probably higher than maybe it should be. And Mitchell's one of those guys that gets beaten up on the odds board week in and week out. And what does he have? 1 win in his PGA Tour career. I think he was a 300 to 1 shot when he won the Honda Classic, but he's a very good player. The strength of his game is certainly off the tee. He's a great driver of the golf ball. And that makes sense here, right? Hit it long, hit it straight, hit greens in regulation, and hopefully get hot with the putter.
And we have 2 players. You have Vegas, and I have, how do you pronounce this kid's name again? Michael.
Thor Bjornsson.
Thor Bjornsson. Okay.
Yes.
So I have Thor Bjornsson on my list. You have Vegas on your list. Thor Bjornsson will be playing here for the first time. I'm taking Thor Bjornsson. I'm trying to get a little Dunlap in Thor Bjornsson. He's never played here before. He's got a ranking of 176. He has 2 top 10s in his last 3 events. Hasn't played yet, but he's just one of these players that might fit the model.
Well, he's one of those guys that he's another guy, I should say, kind of like Keith Mitchell, that the wise guys love to bet every week because he can get red hot. And we saw it last summer. He makes a lot of birdies. He definitely knows how to make birdies. Had a tremendous amateur career. I think he went to Stanford, if I recall. He's probably going to get a win here sometime. I mean, he's going to be a good PGA Tour player, I believe, at some point, and it's just a matter of when, not if. And so I think guys continue to bet him because they don't want to miss out when he does win. And what a better place than the Amex, right? Anything can happen here. It might as well be Michael Thor Bjornsson.
No, that's why we were talking about last week with Clanton, and the problem were his odds. They were 30 to 1.
Right.
It would have been better if they were 50 or 60, which is where he deserved to be. But Thor Bjornsson, his odds are where they deserve to be. Now, I know he wasn't as hot as Clanton. I get that. But still, I think, the odds are the reason why it makes more sense. And you have Johnny Vegas in this one. Matter of fact, it's interesting because Jared is a guy that will take Johnny Vegas, every once in a while. And he's very, he's one of these players that, he's not easy to pick because he doesn't win very often, but he's just one of these players that whenever he is in contention for a win, that's when he just seems to go ahead and get it done.
Well, he's a very good birdie fest player. This guy plays in a lot of watered down field events. He's not necessarily an elite player, but he's a pretty darn good tier 2 or tier 3 player. And he's had a great deal of success in his career in playing, some of the alternate events. He's played at Corrales, Punta Cana. He's played in a number of those tournaments where all the big boys aren't necessarily around, and he's had a great deal of success. He's even had success when the big boys are around. A couple of weeks ago, he finished 4th at the Sentry at Kapalua. And that makes sense because a birdie fest where you've got to drive it long. And it's kind of like Keith Mitchell. Johnny Vegas, the strength of his game has always been off the tee, drives it long and straight. And he's another guy on my list that is not a great putter, but he has won. He's won 4 times on the PGA Tour, including here when it was the Bob Hope Desert Classic in 2011. He's also finished as high as 11th here following that win in 2011. He's just a good, solid player that apparently is in good form right now. I'm garnering that off of the 4th place finish at Kapalua a couple weeks ago. And I just like the type of courses that he does well at. It seems to be the American Express, where, of course, he's been a winner at before. So at 90-1, I thought he was a guy that made sense this week.
All right. And then in this group here, I went ahead and again, just a little bit of value I think I'm getting, and that's Ricky Fowler. I know his season was pretty much a wash last year, but he was playing better down the stretch when everybody was watching football. He finished 16th, 23rd, and 4th to end his year last year, keeping in mind that we haven't seen him yet. So again, that's something that could be an issue based on what we've talked about with trends. He hasn't been all that great here. He does have a 10th place finish in 2020, a couple top 25s overall, even though he's missed a cut 2 of the last 3 years. But his best golf course is Phoenix. And his second best golf course is TPC Sawgrass. Again, you could say what you want about whether or not you think that is a viable course similarity. But the fact is, more so for Phoenix is very interesting. He's a California kid, as we know. And like I said, this is sort of like Jason Day. I think, how do we know that when Ricky ended his season last year, that he's now not just going to pick things off where he was? If that's the case, then I think it's a bargain at 80-1, which is the reason why I'm going to go ahead and take that chance.
Well, you'd love to have the playoff threesome there. Colin Morikawa's not around, but it was a playoff a couple of summers ago at the Rocket Mortgage Classic with Adam Hadwin, Colin Morikawa, and Ricky Fowler. So you've got 2 of the 3 there this week. I think guys like Jason Day, who was number 1 in the world not that long ago, 10 years ago when he won the PGA Championship, I think he's still got some fire left in the tank, and as does Ricky Fowler. I think those guys can fire at any moment, and I'm not gonna argue with taking them, especially at an event like this where the competition is, this is not a major championship. This is not a signature event. You've got a watered down field. Why can't those guys play as good as anyone else?
Moving through the list here to round out our picks, because we have 3 big long shots left. One of them here for me is Alex Smalley. He has played better here each of his 3 times, all top 25s, 20 under, 19 under his last 2 appearances. He's 167th in the world. Keep in mind, mid-2023, he was up to 63rd in the world. So something happened, lost his game, but he was 16th last week. So it's possible that, and he did have some spurts a few months back where he was showing signs. So nice golf course for him, considering he's played well here. I think it's worth taking a shot from my point of view at a player like Alex Smalley for all the reasons we've talked about. I'm also going with Bud Cauley. There you see it 110-1. Cauley really is interesting. He fits the model, 269th in the world. He's coming off a 30th at Sony, and he's got 4 top 15s in 5 appearances here, including 2 top 5s within the rotation of 2016. That's pretty good. And he also has 5 top 35s in his last 6 events. He has moved from 611th in the world to 269th in the world during that span. So that's why I think Bud Cauley is not a bad long shot play as well. And then we move on down even further here. We see all the odds here, and we're going to get to one of your players, Henrik Norlander, who's down to 120-1. You have him at 150-1. So and Matty Schmidt also in this group at 150-1. You have him at 190-1. So talk a little bit about why you decided to go with Norlander and Schmid.
Well, I like both of these guys in a birdie fest, and again in a watered down field. And in fact, Matty Schmid we've seen do very well here at the American Express, tied with Tom Kim for sixth. Just a couple of years ago in 2023, also placed 11th last year at Corrales Punta Cana. So a correlated course there. And in October, just recently, a few months ago, was third right here in Las Vegas at the Shriners Children's Open. So he makes sense on the correlated courses, makes sense in past history here at the American Express. He's a bomber of the golf ball, has strength off the tee. He's the one guy on my list this week that can putt. So a nice combination there of length off the tee and a good putter. He's been playing really well. I think he's got a ton of talent. And, this guy eventually, I believe, is going to make a name for himself. And you're not going to see, 190, 150 to 1 odds here on this guy pretty soon. I think he's got that type of skill set. He spent most of his earlier years on the European Tour, now making his way over the PGA Tour. And I think he definitely has some talent. So to see him at that triple digit price, and he's made sense on other tournaments that are similar to this, went with him. And it's similar with Norlander, not necessarily the same profile skill set wise, but does seem to show up in these birdie fest, watered down field type events. He was decent last week at the Sony. He flashed for a bit. He's deadly accurate off the tee. And the guy just, like I say, when he has success, it's typically at these type of events. He's also been 22nd at Corrales. He's been 22nd at Scottsdale. He's finished as high as 12th here at the American Express. So, you gotta throw some bombs out there with this tournament. And like you say, I got Norlander at 150 to 1. I thought for what this guy has in his bag, it was worth a shot.
And the only other player on either of our list, I went ahead and took a stab at another long shot, Adam Schenk. And for me, it's not like his model works out perfectly or anything like, or his experience here. None of that. Schenk is just a mini streaky player. He's one of these guys that if he plays well, he hasn't done anything. And then if he plays well, chances are he might very well play well again the very next week. And then it goes away again. So at 170 to 1, coming off a 6th place finish last week, I figured, hey, what the heck?
Yeah, it's a pretty big price on Adam Schenk. It was a couple of years ago that he had his best ever year in his career and nearly won the Valspar Championship in Florida. But that was one of many real high finishes for Adam Schenk just a couple of years ago. So to see a guy that has the capability that he does at a number like that is certainly attractive.
Otherwise, I should mention that you are going to have some interesting players, new players in here, especially guys that have played over in Europe and on the DP World Tour. This is one of my oldie favorites here, Matteo Manassero. So glad to see him playing here. We'll see what he's able to do. He came back. He had a nice little comeback last year. He had won a couple of Challenge Tour events. And then finally won another DP2 Tour World event. And then actually almost won 2 more events last year. One where he actually went toe-to-toe with Rory. So his game is starting to get back again. He's inside the top 100. He was a talented young kid. I would love to see him find his game because, I think it'd be a great story if he could become a top 50 player.
No, I agree with you. I think he's one of the more entertaining players that typically resides on the DP World Tour, but good to see him in action here. I look forward to watching him, and I'm with you. I hope he contends so we can see a little bit more of him.
Other than that, we're going to talk more about some of the players that we don't have time to talk about this week. But these are the types of players that we're going to be talking about and just giving you an update so you know who these guys are. I'm talking about players in this field like McCarty, McGreevy. I mean, we haven't talked about these guys yet. There are Svensson, Suber. I mean, there's some guys that could very well contend this week because, again, this is the kind of event where you're going to get players that you just can't have time to talk about. There's just so many of them that could be contenders with the model this week. Peterson. There's going to, again, another DP Tour World play. Rosner's in there this week. So I don't know how often we're going to see those DP Tour players, but I do know that we could start seeing. I mean, this McCarty kid is somebody to keep an eye on. He just came out of nowhere last year, and McGreevy as well. Don't think that they're going to contend this week, but this is what I'm going to look forward to when we talk in a couple of weeks. Is going to be these types of players that we're going to try to update you guys with. So if we don't talk about them on any particular week, at least we'll give you the names to keep an eye on at any particular event that you want to look at them, just because we're not talking about them.
Yeah, McCarty, a winner not too far here from Las Vegas, up in St. George, Utah, as a part of the FedEx Cup Fall at the Black Desert Championship, a new resort course there in St. George, Utah. And by the way, that same week, Matty Schmidt finished top 5 at that tournament, and then came down here to Las Vegas for the Shriners and finished 3rd. So a couple of good weeks in a row there for my guy Schmid. And yeah, McCarty appears to be a guy that could be around finding some success here on tour already very early in his career. A left-handed player already early in his career getting a win on tour, like I say, over the FedEx Fall in 2024.
Yeah, he was number 1 on the KFT tour, I believe, right? Was he the number 1 player? I believe he was. Or at least in the rankings he was, I think.
Yeah, I think you might be right. We learned a lot about him, during the telecast of the Black Desert Championship, like I say, back in October, during the FedEx Fall, because I was not familiar with him beforehand. And then,
Neither was I.
Right. And that's where, that was his coming out party. And yeah, you're right. One of the top players on the Corn Ferry Tour. And now I know, I mentioned Jeff Sherman earlier in the show, the odds maker at the Westgate Superbook here in Las Vegas. I know he liked McCarty last week at the Sony. So he is on some people's radar now for sure.
Yeah, he had 3 KFT wins and a PGA Tour win since July.
Yeah,
that's incredible. Yeah, and 5 additional top 5s and a runner-up. I mean, come on, you can't play much better than that. By the way, McGreevy had a Japan win not too long ago in the same event where Matsuyama and Batia were in. So
yeah, he's a player that has come across my radar a little bit to begin this season as well. Haven't landed on him yet, but he's kind of like Mac Meisner. The name looks familiar, and they're kind of in that same category as an up and coming player. I think both of those guys could find success.
Okay, as we close out, Brady, do you have some, again, like I said last week, do you have some early observation tips regarding any courses that might be similar to what they're going to look forward to next week? Again, as long as everything's cool at the PGA Farmers, what would you say would be the courses that might be very similar?
Well, I tell you what, I've been lucky enough to play this course about half a dozen times when I was going to college in San Diego. Torrey Pines obviously has hosted a couple of U.S. Opens with Tiger Woods winning one. I believe that was 2008. And then I think it was 2021. John Rahm winning there, the most recent edition of the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines. But this is a tremendous golf course, and it's a beast of a golf course. It is long and tough with thick rough. I mean, it is hard. This is no picnic next week. You've got Poana greens, which some guys do not like at all. It's very difficult to putt on these surfaces that can become bumpy. Tony Finau has been a machine at Torrey Pines. I have lost in a playoff here twice with my selections. Most recently, I believe it was Will Zalatoris a couple of years ago when he lost to Luke List. I would say probably and as far as correlated courses, you're probably going to see some Riviera, some Augusta. I think one of the best ones is Quail Hollow, where they play, I believe it's called the Truist Champion. And I don't think they're not going to play it there this year. Wells Fargo is no longer a sponsor, but Quail Hollow is going to host the PGA Championship this year. But it used to be the Wells Fargo Championship. Yep. It was an annual event on the PGA Tour. Rory McIlroy won it last year. Quail Hollow and Torrey Pines. And I'm not sure how similar the courses are exactly. I've never seen Quail Hollow personally up close and personal, like I have Torrey Pines. But I know that one of the most important stats to have success at both of those golf courses is total driving. You've got to be long and straight. And so you got to look for those guys. Scotty Scheffler, Jonathan Vegas, another guy that is Keith Mitchell, we talked about, guys that are long and straight off the tee. Rory McIlroy, he's had tremendous success at Quail Hollow. He's long and straight off the tee. So that's my first go-to stat for Torrey Pines will be total driving, a combination of length and accuracy off the tee.
And we'll talk more about that, much more, on our show next week. Again, keeping in mind that is a Wednesday start. So you got to get your stats and everything and your picks and your research done just a little bit sooner next week. But hey, it'll be worth it because you get you get Wednesday golf, which is kind of cool. And also the final on Saturday. Don't forget to look in the description of this video. You can find out everything about how to contact Brady for podcasts, his written content, anything at all, including, of course, golf. Actually, the golf site, your weekly picks, that is available when? Your information, your preview of the event?
I believe that'll come out first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay. And that, of course, is over at golf.com. So check that out. Again, the link will be in the description. As always, for Brady Kannon, I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you next week here for more golf talk. And don't forget, we'll also be talking more football here on the channel. Of course, it's a big week in the NFL and college football, a week from actually yesterday on a Monday night, and some horse racing. So for any of the golf fans, though, we'll see you again next week. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.